The cold hit me like a slap, sharp enough that I nearly dropped my coffee. I was half awake, curled up on the rickety couch in my tiny apartment, and the heating was broken again. Of course it was broken. It always seemed to fail when I could least afford to fix it. I pulled the single blanket tighter around my shoulders, but it was barely doing the job. Then, just as I was about to mutter a curse to the universe, the door creaked open. "Hey, you look like a frozen burrito," came a voice from the hallway. I looked up, blinking against the dim light. It was Jamie. My roommate, my best friend, the guy who somehow always showed up at the exact moment I was about to lose it. He stood there in those old jeans and a hoodie, his hair tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed. He had that goofy half smile that meant trouble, or maybe something like warmth. "I could say the same to you," I mumbled, shifting to make room as he dropped his jacket on the floor. Jamie grinned and plopped down on the couch beside me. "You know, you could have just texted. I was worried you froze to death or something." I shrugged. "I've been busy freezing to death." He laughed, this low chuckle that made the whole room feel a little less cold. Then he did something that stopped me. Without even thinking, he reached over and pulled the blanket over both of us, dragging me closer in the process. "Here," he said softly, "we only have one blanket. Might as well share." I froze for a second, heart skipping in a way I wasn't ready to admit out loud. It wasn't the first time we'd shared that blanket, but this time felt different. Closer. The kind of close that makes the space between you disappear. Not just the physical space, but the distance you usually keep locked tight. I looked at him and for the first time really noticed the way the light caught his eyes, how his smile softened, how comfortable he seemed sitting right there next to me. The cold was still there, but somehow it didn't matter as much anymore. "Thanks," I said quietly, feeling a little dumbfounded. Jamie just shrugged and nodded like it was no big deal. But I could tell, just by the way he lingered there, that maybe it was. And that's when I realized, this night, with one broken heater and one shared blanket, might be the start of something neither of us saw coming. Something way more than just roommates beating the cold. I wasn't sure yet what it meant, but I knew I wanted to find out. We sat there in the quiet, that same blanket draped over both of us like a fragile shield against the cold creeping through the cracked window. I could feel the heat radiating off Jamie, a warmth that had nothing to do with the broken heater. Normally, we were pretty good at pretending our friendship was just that, friendship. But right now, with his arm resting just a little too close to mine, the line felt blurry. So, I said, trying to fill the silence, "How was your night?" Jamie stretched out, his hand brushing against mine. I didn't pull away. "Not bad. Work was the usual chaos, but I managed to sneak out early. Figured you might need some company." He glanced at me with that easy smile, the one I secretly thought about more than I should. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "You're a lifesaver." I wasn't sure if I meant that because he showed up, or because he pulled me closer under that blanket. For a moment, we just sat there, the kind of comfortable silence that only years of knowing someone can create. I could hear his breathing steady, felt the faint scent of his cologne mixed with whatever shampoo he used. It was oddly calming. "Do you ever think about, more than this?" I asked, nodding toward the space we usually left between us on the couch. Jamie's smile faltered just a bit, like he was weighing his words. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it's complicated, right? I mean, we live together, work together, and it's easier to keep things simple." "Yeah," I said. "Simple is safe, but safe is kind of boring, too." He looked at me, eyes searching. "You mean?" I shrugged, suddenly feeling shy. "I don't know. I guess I'm just tired of pretending I don't want something different. With you." Jamie's smile returned, slower this time, more genuine. "Me too." The room suddenly seemed warmer, or maybe it was just the way my chest tightened. I wanted to reach out, touch his face, say something that would make all this real. But I didn't. Instead, I shifted a little closer, letting my knee brush against his. "Want to watch a movie?" I offered, hoping to keep the moment going without rushing it. "Yeah," he said, nodding. Something low-key. I grabbed the remote from the coffee table and flipped through the options until we settled on a cheesy romantic comedy. It was the kind of movie we'd normally make fun of, but tonight it felt fitting. Awkward, sweet, and full of moments everyone pretended didn't happen in real life. As the movie started, Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder. My heart pounded, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I rested my head on his, letting the tension melt between us. The blanket shifted, and I felt his hand find mine under the fabric, fingers intertwining naturally. For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe maybe this could be more than just a cold night and a shared blanket. Maybe it was the start of something warmer, something that didn't need fixing or explaining. And as the credits rolled with Jamie's hand still in mine and the city lights flickering outside our window, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to let go. We stayed like that for a while after the movie ended. Just sitting, our bodies pressed close under the one blanket, hands still tangled together. I wasn't sure if Jamie felt the same mix of nerves and hope I did, but he didn't pull away, and that was something. It was enough. After a few minutes, he cleared his throat softly. "So, what now?" I blinked, trying to figure out what he meant. "You mean like with us?" "Yeah," he said, glancing at me with that slightly awkward smile he always got when trying to be serious but wasn't quite sure how. "I don't want things to get weird between us, you know? But I also don't want to pretend this never happened." I nodded. "I get that. I guess I was scared of that too. Losing what we have. But maybe this could be something more, without all the drama." Jamie laughed quietly. "Look at us, being all mature about feelings and stuff. Who are we? Adults?" I teased. "Kind of." He smiled again, and there was a softness in his eyes that made my chest ache a little. "Okay, so maybe we try. Take it slow. No pressure." "Deal," I said, squeezing his hand gently. We sat back, letting the silence wrap around us in a way that finally felt comfortable. The night wasn't so cold anymore. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the blinds and a quiet rustling beside me. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I realized I was on the couch, and Jamie was still there, wrapped in the same blanket, his head resting on my chest. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, as I carefully adjusted so I didn't wake him. Part of me wanted to savor this moment forever, but another part knew we couldn't stay in this bubble. When Jamie finally stirred, he opened his eyes and smiled at me like nothing had changed, like we were doing exactly what we were supposed to. "Morning," he whispered. "Morning," I replied, grinning despite the knot of nerves still swirling inside me. We moved through the day with an easy kind of awkwardness, texting each other little jokes, stealing glances when we thought the other wasn't looking. It felt like the beginning of something new but familiar, like coming home after a long trip. That night we cooked dinner together in the cramped kitchen, bumping into each other as we reached for the spices or the cutting board. Jamie caught my hand and held it just a second longer than necessary, his eyes locking with mine. "You know," he said, "this might be the best night in a while." "Yeah," I agreed, heart thudding. "I think it's just the beginning." Later, as we settled back on the couch under the blanket, I realized that cold nights wouldn't be so bad anymore, not with Jamie pulling me closer one way or another. A couple of days later, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, but really just waiting for Jamie to come home. The place smelled faintly of the dinner we had cooked together, the burnt edges on the garlic bread, the faint tang of tomato sauce lingering in the air. I wasn't sure why, but it all felt more meaningful now. Like the small moments we'd shared weren't just ordinary, but part of something quietly unfolding. Jamie walked in like he always did, a little tired, but with that familiar, easy grin. "Hey," he said as he dropped his keys on the counter. "Hey," I answered, standing up and feeling my heart skip a beat. He caught my eye and held it a little longer than usual, like he was searching for the right words. "I've been thinking," he started, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "About us. About this. Whatever it is." "Yeah?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual but failing miserably. "I don't want to mess things up," Jamie admitted, stepping closer. "But I also don't want to pretend there's nothing between us." I smiled, feeling the familiar warmth spread through my chest. Me neither, but maybe it's okay to not have it all figured out yet. He nodded, relief flooding his expression. Yeah, slow is good. I'm good with slow. We stood there for a long moment, the kind where you want to say something really important, but the words get stuck. Then, without much warning, Jamie reached out and took my hand. It was the kind of simple touch that felt like a promise. Days passed, and our easy conversation started to carry a little more weight. We talked about things we'd never shared before, our fears, regrets, hopes. Sometimes we'd sit together in silence, just soaking up the comfort of being close, without needing to fill the space with words. One night, I found Jamie staring at me while we were watching some dumb show on Netflix. He caught me looking and smiled, a little shy. "You okay?" I asked. "Better than okay," he said softly. "I'm happy. With you." "I'm happy too," I whispered. It felt like the kind of moment you want to freeze and keep forever. But life, of course, had other plans. A week later, Jamie got a call from his boss. A new opportunity came up, one that would mean moving to a different city. It was everything he'd been hoping for career-wise, but it also meant time apart. I could see the conflict in his eyes when he told me. "I don't want to leave," he said quietly. "Not like this, not when we're just starting." I squeezed his hand, trying to keep my own voice steady. "We'll figure it out, we'll make it work." "But what if we can't?" Jamie's voice cracked just a bit. I pulled him closer under our one blanket, the same one that had somehow become our little world against the cold. "Then we fight for it, because us, it's worth fighting for." He looked up at me, hope flickering again. "You really think so?" "I do," I promised. That night, we didn't talk about the future or the distance or the what-ifs. We just held each other, wrapped up in the warmth we'd found together, knowing that no matter what came next, this moment was ours. And for the first time, I believed that maybe love wasn't about perfect timing or easy answers. Maybe it was about the courage to pull someone closer, even when you only have one blanket to share. The days leading up to Jamie's potential move felt like we were caught in a slow-motion spiral. Plenty of time, but every moment heavy with the unspoken tension of impending change. I found myself hanging on to the little things. The way his laughter filled the apartment, how he'd sneak in early just to grab coffee with me before work, the way his hand found mine without any conscious thought. One evening, a few nights before he was supposed to leave for that interview trip, we sat on the couch again, the blanket draped over our legs like it had become an extension of us. The TV was on, but mostly ignored. "I hate this," Jamie said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Yeah?" I looked at him, eyebrows raised. "Yeah. I hate feeling like I'm about to lose something important. Like I'm about to walk away from everything that feels right." His voice was low, almost breaking. I pulled him a little closer. "I don't want to lose you either." He looked up at me, eyes searching. "What if this doesn't work? What if the distance—" I cut him off gently. "Then we figure it out. We don't just give up because it's hard. We've got more than one blanket now, Jamie." He smiled wryly. "Are you saying we're stronger than a broken heater and cold nights?" "Exactly that," I grinned. Jamie leaned his head against my shoulder. The warmth between us stretched beyond the blanket, beyond the cold apartment. It felt real, fragile, and powerful all at once. The next morning, Jamie left early for his trip. I watched him walk out the door, the air thick with everything unsaid. We promised to text and call, but that only eased the ache a little. The days without him were colder, quieter. The apartment felt empty, like a part of it had gone missing. I caught myself staring at my phone more than once, waiting for a message or a sign. When one came through with a simple, "Hey," my heart leapt every time. We Skyped at night, sharing parts of our days, laughing over silly stories, and sometimes just sitting in silence, connected by the glow of a screen. It was hard, but it was something. 2 weeks later, Jamie was offered the job. It was everything he wanted, a real step forward. But now, the reality hit harder. He was actually going to move. The night before he left, we sat on the couch, that familiar blanket between us, but it felt thinner somehow. I could tell Jamie was trying to stay strong, but his hands trembled just a bit. "Promise me something," he whispered. "Anything. Promise we won't let this be the end. No matter how far apart we are." I took his hands in mine, squeezing tightly. "I promise." We stayed like that for hours, talking about plans, dreams, and how we'd make it work. When it was finally time to say goodbye, the hug was tight and lingering. A silent vow passed between us. Weeks turned into months. The distance was brutal, but every phone call, every text, every video chat was a lifeline. We celebrated small wins, shared frustrations, and slowly built a rhythm that felt like ours. And then, one chilly evening, Jamie surprised me by showing up on my doorstep, the same blanket wrapped around him, his smile wide and real. "I couldn't wait any longer," he said simply. I pulled him inside, wrapping my arms around him. The cold was still there, but this time, it didn't matter. Because now, no matter what, we had each other, and that was more than enough. When Jamie appeared on my doorstep like that, a little worn out from the trip, his hair messier than usual, that familiar goofy grin lighting up his face, I felt my whole world shift. For months, we'd been holding on to each other through screens and texts, but now he was real, right there in front of me, blanket and all. It was like finally stepping out of a long, cold winter into the first warm day of spring. "Surprise," he said, voice a mix of excitement and exhaustion. I didn't say anything at first, just pulled him inside and closed the door behind us. The apartment felt smaller with him here, but in the best way possible. Every familiar corner suddenly seemed charged with new energy. We dumped his bags by the door and collapsed onto the couch, the blanket still wrapped loosely around his shoulders. I noticed how the edges were frayed, the same blanket we'd shared on those first cold nights. It was ridiculous, but seeing it again made my chest ache with nostalgia. "So," I said, nudging him playfully, "you just decided to move here without telling me?" Jamie shrugged, grinning. "You were right. I couldn't wait. The distance was killing me." I smiled, feeling a warmth that wasn't just from the heating finally working. "Well, you're here now. No more Skype dates and late-night texts." He nodded, eyes softening. "Exactly." We spent the evening catching up, him filling me in on his new job, me sharing the little things that had happened while he was away. But underneath all the chatter, there was something unspoken, a tension building between us. Later, when the apartment grew quiet and the city noises faded into the background, Jamie shifted closer, his hand finding mine again. It felt natural, like coming home. "I missed this," he said softly. "Me too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in slowly. Our lips met with a mix of nervousness and certainty, a kiss that said everything we'd been holding back for months. When we finally pulled apart, Jamie smiled, his forehead resting against mine. "So, what now?" I laughed, the sound a little breathless. "Now? Now we figure it out. Together." He nodded, eyes shining. Together. We spent the next few days wrapped up in each other, exploring what it meant to be more than roommates or friends. The blanket was still there, tossed over the back of the couch, but we didn't need it as much anymore. Our own warmth was enough. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves curled up by the window, the city blurred behind the raindrops. Jamie's head rested on my shoulder, and I traced the lines of his face with my finger. "You know," he murmured, "I was scared this wouldn't work." I shook my head. "Me too, but maybe that's just part of it. Taking a chance, even when it's scary." He looked up at me, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, taking a chance." There was something so genuine in that moment, a quiet understanding that whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, that didn't feel terrifying. Because sometimes, all it takes is one shared blanket and the courage to pull someone closer to change everything. Life settled into a new rhythm after Jamie moved in for good, but somehow it felt less predictable, more alive. The apartment that had once been just a cramped space with a broken heater was now home, not just because of the walls or furniture, but because of him. We had crossed a line from friends to something more, And while it wasn't always easy to navigate, it was real. One Saturday morning, I woke up later than usual, the sunlight streaming through the blinds and warming the side of my face. I blinked a few times and then realized Jamie wasn't in bed beside me. I got up quietly, still half asleep, and padded down the hallway toward the kitchen. He was there, standing by the stove, eggs sizzling in the pan, the smell of coffee filling the air. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Morning," he said, voice rough from sleep but cheerful. "Morning," I replied, rubbing the last of the sleep from my eyes. "You're making breakfast?" he grinned, flipping the eggs with a practiced flick. "Thought I'd surprise you. You've been working so hard lately." I felt this wave of warmth that wasn't just from the food. "That's really sweet." Jamie shrugged, but his eyes were bright. "Hey, someone's got to take care of you." We ate together at the small kitchen table, the clatter of plates and the occasional shared smile filling the space. It was simple, but it felt like this was what life was supposed to be. Later, we decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood. The air was crisp, the kind of cool that still had a hint of winter's bite, but promised spring was on its way. Jamie pulled his jacket tighter, and I found myself inching closer to him, like the cold wasn't just outside. "You know," he said suddenly, "I'm really glad I came back." I smiled, my heart catching. "Me too. It's been better than I could have hoped." He looked at me, eyes serious for a moment. "Are you scared? About us?" I thought about that. The risks, the unknowns, the past fears. "Yeah, sometimes. But I think it's worth it." Jamie nodded, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "Me too." We walked in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet that lets you just be with someone without needing words. When we got back to the apartment, Jamie flopped down on the couch, pulling the old blanket over his legs. I couldn't help but laugh, seeing that ragged piece of fabric still hanging around like a relic. "Still can't get rid of it, huh?" I teased. He looked up with a mock scowl. "It's our blanket." "It's lucky," I smiled, crawling onto the couch beside him and tugging the blanket over both of us. "Guess we'll have to keep it then." Jamie leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder. "I don't mind." As the evening wore on, we talked about everything and nothing. The small plans for the weekend, the silly dreams we'd never admit out loud, the fears that still lingered beneath the surface. But through it all, there was this growing sense of trust and belonging. That night, as I lay in bed with Jamie's arm wrapped around me, I realized something important. Love wasn't about having everything figured out or never feeling scared. It was about showing up, again and again, choosing each other even when it was messy or uncertain. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made it so real. I closed my eyes, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath, and whispered, "I'm glad you pulled me closer." He smiled against my skin, and I knew we were exactly where we were supposed to be. The weeks after that night felt like we were building something new, brick by brick, careful but hopeful. It was funny how the smallest things took on new meaning, like Jamie's habit of brewing way too much coffee in the morning, or how I always found his favorite hoodie hanging on the back of my chair. The apartment felt alive in a way it never had before. One afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my emails, when Jamie wandered in with that mischievous grin I knew too well. "You look like you could use a break," he said, tossing a pair of socks at me. I caught them, laughing. "Is that your way of saying I'm glued to my laptop?" "Maybe," he shrugged, pulling up a chair and sitting across from me. "Or maybe I just want to hang out without you disappearing behind a screen." I closed the laptop, grateful for the excuse. "All right, what's the plan?" Jamie's grin widened. "I thought we could get out of here for a while. Just you and me. No work, no distractions." I raised an eyebrow. "Where?" He shrugged again like it was no big deal. "Anywhere. Let's just drive. See where the road takes us." The idea was spontaneous, reckless even. But that was the point. I nodded before I could talk myself out of it. "All right, let's do it." That evening, we packed a bag, grabbed the blanket, the same old one, frayed and faded but somehow still ours, and hit the road. The city lights faded behind us, replaced by stretches of dark highway and stars spilling across the sky. We didn't have a destination, just a vague plan to find somewhere quiet, somewhere we could talk without interruptions. As the miles slipped by, Jamie reached over and took my hand. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, just simple and steady, but it made my heart race all the same. After a few hours, we pulled into a small town, the kind with a single main street, a diner that looked like it hadn't changed in 50 years, and a park with benches facing a calm lake. We decided to stretch our legs there, walking side by side under the moonlight. The water was still, reflecting the stars and the soft glow of street lamps. We found a bench and sat down, the blanket between us for warmth. Jamie leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt the familiar comfort of being close. "Thanks for doing this," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For taking a chance on us, for not running away when it got complicated." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "It's not always easy, but I'm not going anywhere." We sat there for a long time, talking about dreams we'd been too scared to admit before, about what we wanted from life and each other. The conversation drifted effortlessly, like the water before us. When it was time to head back, neither of us wanted to break the spell. On the drive home, the silence was comfortable, filled with a quiet understanding that we were building something real, something worth holding on to. Back at the apartment, we collapsed onto the couch, the blanket wrapping us up like a cocoon. Jamie looked at me, his eyes soft. "You know," he said, "no matter where we go or what happens, I'm just glad we pulled each other closer." I nodded, feeling a warmth that wasn't just from the blanket. "Me too." And in that moment, with the city humming quietly outside our windows, I knew that whatever the future held, we'd face it together. With one blanket, two hearts, and 1,000 moments still to come. It wasn't some grand gesture or big declaration that made me realize how far we'd come. It was a quiet evening, just the two of us, sitting on the couch wrapped up in that old blanket, the one that started it all. Jamie was scrolling through his phone, and I was half listening to some music playing softly in the background. The heater hummed quietly, finally fixed, but honestly, it didn't matter anymore. The apartment felt warm, not because of the temperature, but because of him. He looked up, caught my gaze, and smiled. That smile that never failed to make my chest tighten. "You ever think about how weird this all started?" I chuckled. "Frozen on the couch, sharing one blanket because the heater was broken?" He nodded, laughing softly. "Yeah, funny how something so simple turned into all of this." I reached over and took his hand in mine, fingers intertwining, like they'd done so many times before. But this time, there was a calm certainty to it. "I'm glad you pulled me closer that night," I said quietly. "I'm glad we didn't let the cold keep us apart." Jamie's smile softened, and he leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "Neither am I." We stayed like that for a moment, just breathing each other in, the world outside fading away. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, uncertainties about work, about the future, but those felt smaller somehow. Because we had each other. That night, as we finally drifted to sleep, tangled under the blanket that had become our little symbol of connection, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just about warmth or comfort. It was about trust, about choosing someone even when it was messy or scary. Looking back, that broken heater and one shared blanket were more than just circumstances. They were the start of a story I never expected, but wouldn't trade for the world. As I closed my eyes, Jamie's steady breathing next to me, I knew that no matter what life threw our way, we had something real, something worth holding on to. Sometimes, all it takes is one simple moment to change everything. And for us, that moment was a blanket and a pull that led to forever.